Welcome back to News Hour. Thank you for staying with us. Without further ado, let's cross over to that exclusive interview where my colleague Anki Doris Mbat is set to host exclusively the Wiper Democratic Movement Party leader Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka on the recent developments that have played out in Kenya's political landscape. Anki, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jesse Rogers, for this very, very important introduction to this very anticipated conversation this evening. You can see outside, I'm just about enjoying the breeze and the beautiful residents of Kalonzo Musyoka right on location. And I know that Kenyans have been sending their questions already on our social media. It's overwhelming. A number of questions coming in for Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, Senior Counsel. I'm giving you his profile shortly. He's seated right here with me and is equally eager to speak to the Kenyans tonight on matters of national importance. If you looked at our poster tonight, the Kenya's political landscape through Kalonzo's eyes, you'd ask, why Kalonzo? He has served as the 10th Vice President of the Republic of Kenya. In fact, he was first elected to the parliament at the age of about 31 in the year 1983. Prior to that, he had already, declared his ambition and vied in 1983. That is very, very interesting. But he went on to serve in the public office uninterrupted for about 28 years straight, and he's still here today, even as we also acknowledge that he's a father and a family man. He is also the party leader of Wiper Democratic Movement Kenya, which will be celebrating 20 years this month. He'll tell us more about that. He has served in different capacities as Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya twice. We're talking about 2003 to 2005, and he's also served between 1993 to 1998. He served as a Minister of Education, Minister of Information, among others, but very key as we bring in also the aspect of the majority and minority in the National Assembly. Kalonzo Musyoka has served as a Deputy Speaker of National Assembly of Kenya from 1988 to 1992. Now a member of National Assembly and so many other things. I can go on and on and on and not even get to the point where he served as the Special Envoy to Sudan. It would be endless.
You forgot I was Minister for the Environment. When Professor Wangari Maathai won the Nobel Peace Award, and I had the privilege of escorting her to Oslo. And then I made a remark that I was the only minister I could think of in the world whose deputy was more famous than him, than himself. And you tried to itemize, to list the ministries. You forgot I was also Ministry for Home Affairs. Yeah?
It is.
So nobody gets his list correct, but never mind.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For, welcoming us to your residence.
Welcome.
And for enjoying the cold with us today. There's a fire there.
A fire.
All right, let's start with, your book, Against All Odds. And I want to start with that because most recently you're now an author. And because we want to see things through your eyes. First, let me just hold it. Against All Odds, this particular book, it doesn't feel very light. There's a lot in it. I will start with why Against All Odds. And just take us back to an afternoon one Friday in April. I believe that's where it began. And I also understand you have a special gazebo that could bring a bit of nostalgia. What has your journey been like, Kalonzo?
Well, simple village boy, born in Sekuru, in Kitui County. That is home. I guess that is the equivalent of Wamunyoro.
Okay. The village, Gachagua.
Or Sugoi or someplace. Or indeed the Shaweri, these places. But I come from a village which was, at the time I was born, a conflict zone. That explains why I have a passion for resolving conflicts. We then had the Shifter War. I used to hide in the bush. At least then our late mother would carry me and escape into the bush. And so Against All Odds has a lot to do, or something to do, with a very difficult background And one gets up to become what you have yourself said, the vice president. And who would have imagined that such a one would even be garnering for the post of leadership, the top leadership of the country? Once in 2007, and most probably, not most probably, it is obvious to all and sundry that we will be in the ballot in 2027 or even earlier.
Or even earlier?
Yes.
Speaking of which, I can see you're enjoying a cup of tea there. It's very important then to talk about the cup of tea that was shared today, because we're talking about 2027, and just want to hear on a light note, because having seen you with, your friends, you actually wrote that on your X platform. You're just enjoying a cup of tea.
It was.
With Eugene
But I think I had cappuccino.
Oh, yeah?
And and Eugene had cappuccino.
Yes.
But Ricky G, I noticed, he said, not Milo. What is it?
Is it hot chocolate?
Hot chocolate, white, he said. Okay.
Yes.
It was simple, very simple. Since I think we last met when Eugene Wamalwa and his team were launching the headquarters for Democratic Action Kenya.
Yes.
That's the first time we had a get-together, and we made some statements there.
Yes.
And it's always good to catch up. It's very, very important to catch up. So we were catching up with each other.
So you were just catching up?
Yeah, I tell you, I had a lot of very interesting things as we had that coffee. And I think they should remain within that space. But it was very, very interesting. I must say, I don't know much about Rigathi, but, and because the first time I saw him, he was talking like William Ruto.
Okay.
Kind of thing. They kind of influence each other's style of talk and conversation. And I noticed he still has a little bit of, he says Mr. President, and some of us are not used to that. We call him William Ruto. But that he was apparently enjoying all the visits to Amunyoro.
Yes.
He shared that with us. And because when some militias were unleashed against him and Pastor Dorcas, they couldn't even do church or something. They decided to retreat to their place.
Okay.
Very comfortable. But the most interesting joke I had was when Rigathi and his wife were discussing, how would we react? Because knowing William Ruto, they know him. He could take an helicopter and land in Wamunyoro.
All right.
How would they react?
How would they react?
That's right. Now, I'm not going to disclose what we shared. But that tells you that, we are in one country.
All right.
We are one people at the end of the day. And, but anybody getting a visit from William Ruto at this time is likely to attract a lot of conversation.
All right.
To put it diplomatically.
Diplomatically.
Yes.
Speaking of which, I want to just go into, before we will look at the 2027 conversation, but prior to that, there is the diplomatic conversation that is going on. Just over the weekend, if I put it that way, the AUC elections took center stage, not just in this country, but continentally, in fact, globally, because then we followed closely what happened. Raila Odinga, your ally, if I put it that way, politically, you have walked this journey with him until most recently when he was fronted for this position, and you wished him well.
Yeah.
You even said you would take...
Very sincerely.
Very sincerely.
Absolutely. And I even did a few things.
Yes.
To push his candidature. Yeah, and I'm sure he's aware.
But he
talking to 2 or 3 of my good African heads of state. Yeah. And I started with President Akaide in Kinshasa during the swearing in of President Felix, second term of DRC. It was then that Qaeda approached me, and ahead of us was President Kikwete, another friend of mine, and Mzee Olusegun Obasanjo.
Nigeria.
Yes, and so Qaeda said, this thing Obasanjo is telling me,
yes.
Can you confirm or deny that your friend Raila is going to run for this seat?
Yes.
I hadn't discussed it with Raila at that point, but I decided, wow, let me hazard a guess. And after that, when we came back, I called him. I said, I've been asked difficult questions you never shared with me. So he said, it is true. So the candidature then was established.
But there we had the votes. And so far he has lost in his back home, which he declared, whichever way it goes, he has come back home. He said he has a lot to do.
Home is home.
But you gave some remarks on Sunday.
Yes.
Precisely on who blundered where. And you called out President William Ruto in certain areas. You're a diplomat.
Yes.
So you would know what would have been done better.
Yes. I tell you, as a Kenyan, I was hurting.
Okay.
And I still would wish to repeat, because that was a slap on the face. It goes to show the extent to which our country has lost face and recognition. I'll elaborate. We are known in the region as a country that is beholden to working towards peace and regional stability, because we live in a region which has been quite tough. Look at the entire Horn of Africa region, which includes Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia.
Yes.
Now, and of course the IGAD region. Our involvement in Somalia over the years, since the overthrow of Siad Barre in 1991. My own involvement as Minister for Foreign Affairs that time, including declaring myself a member of one of the Somali clans, Digli Merifli, because of the Hiers, the Wiers, and the Darots. And even our involvement in Burundi that time. One time, President Kikwete and I, as foreign ministers, and Mwalimu Nyerere, were working on stability of Burundi, and then South Africans came into the scene. We tried to work. Of course, in 1994, after the genocide, literally in Rwanda, I was then foreign minister, when the whole world seemed to have left that country to perish, including the United Nations that time. Terrible mistakes were made. And then the country, even when people like Museveni were fighting to claim leadership of Uganda, Kenya was seen to be home to them. Museveni, I think, knows a lot of corners in this country. Now, imagine all of a sudden, somebody like BCJ is abducted. We are now known as a country of abductions, all right? That is terrible, and these are the terrible negative effect on the candidature of Raila Amolo Odinga.
All right.
Not to mention, of course, the fact that nearly a year ago, the Gen Z revolution, all right, which continues, by the way.
You actually called it a revolution.
It's a revolution.
All right.
And in my view, this is continuing, because the issues that were raised a year ago have never been addressed. Instead of getting them addressed on transparency, good governance, stopping corruption, and all of that, instead of working on those issues, this administration, the William Ruto administration, resorted to abducting the young people, right? We put it rightly or wrongly, I think. I'm quite clear in my mind. Anybody who is on Safaricom, the young people on Safaricom, right, got that particular network provider got compromised by the state, and then young people were followed and put into the boots of Subarus, the famous Subarus, and even as we speak, that is a challenge. And nothing by way of addressing the concerns was ever discussed. Remember, sometimes they're saying maybe they will compensate the families, maybe they will try and do something. Nothing doing. Therefore, there is anger in the air. And even as the country moves towards June 25th, I call it J25.
All right.
June 25th, to mark the first anniversary of the Gen Z revolution, I think there'll be fireworks. Therefore, this revolution continues.
Now, besides the revolution, because I think we lost track there a bit, we were in the diplomatic, ties and what's happening. I'm holding just a copy of the Standard today, the Bold newspaper. And what
betrayed by Kenya.
This is
the
what
country
it
of
is.
Abductions.
And
by the way,
yes,
against some of the international conventions. Remember, even before this, Tamtaks were apprehended. And the result of some of these things, by the way, had even international repercussions.
All right.
But let me just complete my thought.
Yes.
About what I was telling you about what may have affected Raila Odinga's candidature.
Right.
This matter of abductions, the Gen Z revolution, and even now, tied to the Bisinji story, you have a situation which is even now ongoing, and it's very disturbing, when William Ruto allowed a group calling itself the River Congo Alliance at the Serena Hotel, one of our premier hotels, right? Complete with wonderful government reception, because nobody will come from the airport and go and get booked at the Serena Hotel without intelligence networks and all knowing. So this, although William Ruto said, we are a democratic country,
well,
we cannot stop anybody from making statements, but I want to suggest, it is very clear that this was well planned with concurrence and facilitation of Kenya Kwanza administration. The result of that was that Kinshasa withdrew the ambassador to Kenya. All right? And our own ambassador, I think, was also asked to leave. And that hostility continued. I happen to know that President Felix Tshisekedi is a friend of Raila. And they got to a stage where Felix told Raila, I have no problem, you have my vote, but you're president.
Okay.
But you're president. So there are issues that are particular to William Ruto.
All right.
And the effect of it is to lose our status as a country, as a bastion of peace and harmony in order to facilitate conflict resolution. We worked, of course, for South Sudan.
And I was coming there.
South Sudan,
yes.
We worked even for the Sudan itself.
All right.
I remember before we signed the comprehensive peace agreement in Nairobi in 2005, in order to get President al-Bashir to agree to the comprehensive peace agreement, popularly known as a CPA, I had to use all manner of diplomatic approaches. Some of it not the normal diplomatic approaches. I mean, where you call ambassadors and high commissioners and drink tea and drink coffee and visit with them. We had to use all manner of approaches, including sending friends to talk to President Bouteflika, then President of Algeria, who agreed to talk to President al-Bashir in order to agree to allow the status of Khartoum. Khartoum now is a war zone.
As we speak.
Allow Khartoum,
yes,
right, to be Sharia-free during the duration which we called the precursor to the referendum under the CPA.
All right.
Okay? So, and this worked, including, by the way, inviting Ali Osman Taha, the then vice president, under Bashir, to come to attend ostensibly the funeral of our late brother, Kijana Wamalwa, who died. And I was not a vice president, but I invited him in writing to come. The plan was, if our brother, Dr. John Garang, failed to show up in Nairobi, all right, then in order to cover up President Bashir's concerns, his vice president was going to represent him in the state funeral of Vice President Kijana Wamalwa. So you use those tactics.
Yes.
But this current administration has absolutely no knowledge of some of these things. But worse, the cardinal principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries, including neighboring states. They seem to have forgotten and ignored that completely. Now, as we speak, Dagalo.
Oh, yes.
Hemeti is in Nairobi, and they are here to sign an agreement to establish a parallel government to the one led by General Buran. What does that mean? Direct interference in the affairs of a neighboring country. But I stand to be guided.
Okay.
If President William Ruto comes and says, oh, I consulted with the member countries of IGAD. Remember, we belong to a very important regional bloc. And again, I worked so hard, I remember in Djibouti, amending the charter of IGAD from double G to IGAD, Intergovernmental Authority on Development. And one of the main thrusts is working for peace in the region. Now, if Ruto comes up and says, oh, I consulted with the regional heads of state for IGAD, and they allowed me to host a METI in Nairobi, maybe I can give him the benefit of the doubt. But if there was no consultation, then this is direct interference. And in fact, it puts Kenya again on the firing line. Because you never know what the other side of Sudan would want to do. So I've given you 2 cases of interference in internal affairs.
And how actually...
That DRC, and by the way, we worked very hard to get DRC to become a member of East African Community. I want to make here a statement. As we speak, Kenya Kwanza administration has ruined the status of integration within the East African Community, number 1, and they have also now ruined the status of IGAD. Therefore, what are they doing? They're making Kenya a pariah state. That's what it is. Okay, so I wanted to make that statement.
And it's very important.
I hope you don't feel disturbed.
I do not feel disturbed at all. What we're trying here is to tap into your expertise as a diplomat, having served, and I just want to share this with the viewer, as an envoy to Sudan, all right, under President Uhuru Kenyatta's regime. You were also recognized, if I am correct, August 18th, about 2016, and you were awarded by an NGO, but it was still an award, the African Dignity Man of the Year in a glamorous ceremony in New York. This is what they actually attributed it to. Kalonzo Musyoka was recognized in that nomination for the efforts to bring peace to South Sudan during his tenure as Foreign Affairs Minister. Just one question before we take a breather. There's a Kenya you envision for yourself, that young man in Mwingi, all right, who vied in the 1980s, who is still here, anticipating to make Kenya a better place in 2027. But this is what I want to hear before we take a short breather. There has to be a turnaround. There has to be a lesson learned from what happened at the AUC and what you have spoken to about right now. Regardless of what you said, we need to know if President Ruto consulted it as far as the parallel government signage is concerned. What would be your take home, or what would you say in as far as getting things right from the lessons learned?
Yeah, first of all, I maintain that Raila did not lose. It was William Ruto who lost. And Kenya also lost. Like a slap on the face. All right? So that, let's be very clear, and I've given you the reasons. The block of 16 member countries of SADC, when there was a lot of interference within the affairs of the DRC, decided, and by the way, when Goma fell several days ago, and we are talking about 5,000 plus dead in Goma, and about 200 dead in Bukavu just about 2-3 days ago.
The city, yes.
With the UN soldiers, mainly some of them, by the way, from member countries of SADC. South African soldiers were killed in Goma. Tanzanian soldiers too were killed, all right? What does that tell you? That bloc then got together and said we must punish Kenya. Not Raila Odinga.
Kenya.
Kenya.
All right.
All right? So, we hope Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga will be thinking hard about what to do about what happened in Addis Ababa. But I listened to on a lighter note. some supporters of Raila in Kisumu
As we take a break,
were saying, hey, this Addis Ababa, we can't get there to do demonstrations, right? And by the way, how can Baba go to lose in a city which is named after him, Addis Ababa?
Oh, interesting. Let me take a short break on that note. Remember, we're coming back to go deeper into the political alignments. I mean, how can we sit with Kalonzo Musyoka and not ask him what it would mean for Baba's return into politics? Let's take a short break.
It's not possible for Raila to, when you say return to politics,